Welcome to episode 99 of the Lowdown Radio Show presented by eBay Motors. I'm Neil Graham. This week, ADV Riders managing editor Zac Kurylyk joins me to discuss the relevancy, if in fact any exists, of the motorcycle show. You remember them, those old-fashioned shindigs where enthusiasts would gather in the middle of winter to look at new bikes and to fantasize about weather that's better than what's outside. In most places, traditional bike shows are dead, but Zac and I met a week ago at one that's still hanging on, and we'll share our thoughts on the show, the bikes, and on a particular retailer who nearly caused me to blow a head gasket. And stick around at the end of the show where I'll revisit the home mechanic's best friend, something that's become unfairly obsolete in the digital age. But first, this message from eBay. The worst part about loving cars might just be buying them and all the parts. From Toyotas to Aston Martins, eBay has thousands of cars and the largest online selection of vehicle parts and accessories. eBay, things people love. Zac, you and I did something really unusual a week ago. After we had a very good breakfast of huevos divorciados at my favorite restaurant in Toronto, favorite breakfast place in Toronto. Although the last time I was there, I think it was $12 for breakfast, and this time it was about double that. So things have changed, I can tell you that for sure. We went to a motorcycle show, the motorcycle industry show in Toronto, and it's one of those things that's kind of dying off in the US. The big industry shows are gone. For some reason, they're hanging on here and other countries, the UK, these traditional shows are still reasonably popular. In the US, of course, they've been replaced by shows like The One Show or Born Free, more lifestyle shows. So I guess the question for you is, if you walked in this show and you didn't know the hierarchy of brands, and you just came off the street, you had a newfound interest in motorcycling, what would these shows currently show you or currently tell you versus the heyday of the motorcycle show?
I think a lot of people come in off the street looking for a Harley or a Ninja. To most non-motorcyclists, that's the great divisions of the motorcycle world. They mean, when they say Harley, they mean a cruiser. When they say Ninja, they mean a sport bike. And I would walk in the front door of the show and I wouldn't see a Harley or a Ninja, especially because Kawasaki, who actually makes the Ninja, doesn't even attend the show circuit in Canada. You would take some bumbling around. You might bump into the Harley booth where you would see their cruisers on display. It was quite busy. Or you might bumble into Honda where they had pretty much everything, cruisers, sport bikes. And then you would see a bunch of adventure bikes off in the corner. And then you would see a lot of naked bikes, which maybe they would classify as Ninjas. I'm not sure. But the industry has certainly changed since my first motorcycle show, which was mostly Harleys and Ninjas years ago.
Well, it is interesting how it's changed. And one of the questions I have about motorcycle shows, and it's, I think for those of us that have kicked around motorcycling for a while, it's very hard to remember back when these things were new, and one of the things we have to try to do, I think it behooves us to remember, what it's like if you have a newfound enthusiasm for motorcycling, and maybe those of us who've been around bikes for a long time, maybe you get into, I don't know, guitars or bicycles or something like that. And you have to, use that as a way to remind yourself that there was once a time when you walked into this and it was just like a candy store. But what's happened is because the manufacturers don't all support these shows, it's a really selective candy store. You don't get all brands. You don't get the toffee and the chocolate. So that's a really bad analogy, but you get my point. So what is the relevance of a show if everyone isn't there?
Well, if not everyone's there, then you'd better get used to eating milk duds.
I remember those.
I think that it's still of interest to a lot of people. And if you're new to motorcycling, new to the scene, it can still be a good way to get your feet underneath you, see what's available. But I would say that it's certainly of less appeal than it was 10 years ago, certainly before COVID. I would say the shows were at their strongest before, obviously, 2008 recession. But even since then, the shows in the early 2010s were still fun and big. Now they aren't. You can go to them as a new rider, somebody who doesn't know what's what. You can see what's available from a select group of manufacturers. You could still see most of the industry there, but the displays are not as big as they used to be, and the attendees are fewer than they used to be. And I would say that a lot of the industry is less enthusiastic than it used to be.
I think it's also worth saying that, and this isn't apparent at first blush, and sometimes I struggle to figure it out, but there's a difference between a manufacturer display where Ducati or Honda, comes out of HQ with one of each of their bikes versus what happens now. And they tend to make them look like OEM displays, but really what they are is the OEM will sort of partner with a local dealer. But the local dealer, like for instance, there was a very small Ducati show, but they didn't have, I don't think they had the V4s, the Panigales, they had a V2. So it was a very selective display and you don't get the full range. So I think it's a bit of a disservice for someone who's coming in hoping to see everything because you just don't. It's so selective.
Yes, and I'm sure there's a few reasons for why OEMs do things that way. Sometimes they might not have the staff to run the booth all weekend, and it wouldn't surprise me if it was also tied to the cost of it somehow. Maybe dealers get one rate, OEMs get another rate, and things like that. There's always a lot of background stuff in the industry that you and I might see a glimpse of, but your average showgoer does not. If I had been to the motorcycle show and I wanted to see the V4 Panigale, I would be disappointed that it wasn't there, but I would probably go back the next year. But if that's the story 2 or 3 years in a row, well, eventually, even the smartest person gets tired of being beat over the head with a stick, or maybe that should be the dumbest person. But anyway, the smartest person gets tired more quickly.
It's fairly clear to me that you've been hit over the head too many times with this stick. The question here is, why are these shows dying off? And I think it's sometimes everyone assumes these things, but we all assume something slightly different. So, I talked to a lot of people, and here's kind of what happened so far as I can piece it together from conversations I've had with people in the biz, which is, of course, the online world has changed everything, changed what you and I do. It has changed everybody's life. But in terms of the motorcycling world, of course, you can see new bikes. They're now launched online. Some companies do it in a very extravagant way. Ducati has these ridiculous kind of presentations in Bologna with women in nightgowns, and it's quite a little over the top. Actually, very over the top. But the thing that no one talks about is COVID. And so during COVID, when shows were prohibited, the major OEMs got to strike a huge amount of money off their expenditures because shows are incredibly expensive. Here in Canada, which is a wide country, a broad country, but not a heavily populated one. But to haul your bikes and to have staff and to do it across 6 or 7 locations in the middle of winter, which makes transportation a real challenge. You're talking over $100,000 for a company to do it. And then once you remove that, and strike it off, to then put it back on when there is the added influence of this online life that we lead. It's just not going to happen. There isn't any appetite for it anymore. So what you have at least in Canada, is this kind of absurd paradox where you have the shows are run by the OEMs, and it's the OEMs that aren't attending the shows. And there is this kind of push and pull, a bit of tension between this sort of arm's length company that runs the shows and that wants to create business for itself. And then there are, of course, with the OEMs who are saying, well, no, just because we support you doesn't mean we have to go to it. So it's this odd kind of tension that exists there.
Well, especially in Toronto, where you also have the beef jerky show in January, which is, for those listeners who don't know what the beef jerky show is, it's a motorcycle show that's got a lot of beef jerky at it. It bills itself as the world's largest motorcycle show, and by square footage, maybe they have a claim.
Well, I think North America's, because it's obviously no EICMA, so I would say it's North America's. Yeah.
Okay. Well, their competition's greatly reduced these days anyway. And then there's the spring show in Toronto, and then there's also the hipster show or shows in the summer. There's usually one or two, so there's a lot of competition for that marketing money. I just noticed a couple of news pieces this week actually about marketing budgets. Yamaha USA is moving the remnants of its US operation are moving to Georgia from California. One of the reasons that they're citing for this move is the fact that I believe their operating profit was down 30% last year, and they blame tariffs. And another piece that was on ADV Riders website this morning, Harley Davidson Homecoming Festival is canceled for 2026 as well. So Yamaha and Harley Davidson are big companies with different financial realities underneath that facade. But both of those companies are making big changes, and dollars and cents is why. And we're going to see more and more changes in how motorcycles are marketed in the next 20 years or next 10 years, as the internet not only makes it easier to market them in new ways, but arguably reduces or changes the financials of the buyers, changes the financials of the companies themselves. It's all up for grabs. And the old days when the companies could blow $100,000, like you said, on a big display on the show circuit, those days are probably gone.
If you're going to buy a bike, or if you're just keen on bikes, what's the advantage of seeing them in person versus seeing photographs? And I was given kind of a stark reminder of this because, you see photographs and you watch the videos and you think, well, okay, I've seen it. But of course, it's a very different thing to see a three-dimensional object in person versus represented two-dimensionally in a video or photograph. And for me, it was the MV Agusta Super Veloces, which I don't mind as much as some really. It seems like people either hate them or love them. I'm a little uncertain. But they, for instance, they were much smaller, physically smaller than I would have thought. They looked really, delightfully diminutive, and because, as we know, bikes are getting bigger, and I'll get to that in a second. But the MVs were quite small, and the detailing was beautiful. I still think they're a little cockeyed looking for some reason, but MV does just try too hard. But then, counter to that, there was a 1300 GS, BMW 1300 GS Adventure, and I took a photograph of it from the rear, and it looks like, from the rear view, it looks like a seat and a back tire have been stuck onto the side of a refrigerator. I mean, and that's sort of no exaggeration. It's a short refrigerator, but it is the width of that tank is just astonishing. And in photographs, it's kind of funky looking, but it doesn't look that huge. But my God, did you look at it?
I saw it walking by. I didn't take a picture from the back end of it.
I guess I'm a back end guy. It was just the size of it is just, it's astonishing. And sitting there on a center stand, I mean, people are walking by and there's the bike is hovering over them like it's judging them in the way the BMWs do. So I guess the question is, do you feel that it's necessary to see something three-dimensionally to really get a sense of what it is?
I think I know exactly what you're talking about because I went to the Triumph booth to look at the new 400 that came out this year. I think there's a flat tracker. I think they had it there. Anyway, since
it's a bit, I think they call it, it's a scrambler. Don't they call it a scrambler?
I think they have both because I did try the scrambler on for size. I thought, since I had that big crash last October, maybe a scrambler would offer a slightly lower seat height than a dual sport and be, comfortable little ride. And I went to throw a leg over it, and it was not really very comfortable for my still under repair hip joint. So
comfortable, i.e. the seat was very high?
The seat was higher than I expected. It was more of a climb aboard than I expected.
Right.
So that's something I wouldn't have got from a spec sheet. You can only figure out some of this stuff for yourself. My wrist is still not working 100% correctly. In fact, it's far from it. So I went to a lot of bikes to see what throttles I could use, what throttles were manageable with the handlebar bends and so on. And again, that's the kind of thing you can't get from a picture or from a glitzy YouTube video presentation like Ducati puts out every time they release a new bike.
I take your point, especially I've been gifted with a very generous inseam, which I'm thankful for, except when I get on a sport bike when I wish it was a little shorter. But so I don't go for the seat height thing, and I know that's a big deal for a lot of people, and rightly so. And motorcycles are not kind to people who are not tall, which is really kind of shameful, I think, ultimately. And a disservice to those who are trying to flog vehicles to people, because the average height of people is not 6'2". But the thing about sitting on motorcycles, because motorcycles are a dynamic thing, they're meant to be ridden. I'm not sure that sitting on them really tells you a whole lot about them. I mean, think of the opposite. Think of something that is, say, like a lazy boy. If you were sitting on a lazy boy chair, say it was on a trailer when you're going 60 miles an hour, that's not a typical use for a lazy boy. Stick with me here, Zach. So when you're just sitting on a motorcycle and it's stationary, yes, you get a sense of it. But, I think one of the things that sold a lot of cruisers, and cruisers do not agree with my back issues, the loading of the spine. But when you sit on a cruiser, I mean, it's like a hot tub. It's so nice. And your feet are out there. But of course, as soon as you get some wind on you, I mean, it for me anyway, the way you lever against your spine, it's excruciating. So I'm not sure that sitting on a stationary vehicle really tells you a whole lot about it.
I would certainly agree with a lot of what you just said. But if I can't get my leg over the seat to start with, I can figure that out at a motorcycle show, whether or not the bike's in motion, because I don't throw my legs over a motorcycle that's in motion, ideally.
I thought you were going to say, I don't throw my legs over just anything, sweetheart. I really thought that you were going there. Well, okay, but maybe that's a question of maybe that's a lifestyle choice, Zach. Maybe you need to work on some flexibility.
Well, that's what my physiotherapist says.
Well, you see, he's not wrong, is he? Now, I should cut you a little slack because you did crash into a car in the fall, and I'm supposed to be concerned. So anyway, but I would work on your flexibility, because that is a big one. But I got to say, when I get on my Ducati, I tend to boot the tail section often, and I'm extremely judgmental when other people get on bikes and boot the tail section. So I feel that's maybe something I have to work on. The cars you'll find on eBay are just different. They come with a story that you can't wait to share. Maybe it's the car's history or the story of how you found it. Like this 1973 Dodge Charger on eBay that had been tucked away in an Arizona barn for over 40 years, only 55,000 miles, and somehow in great running order. It even has a rare sunroof. Suddenly, a car that was hidden for decades is uncovered on eBay and ready to be delivered straight to your driveway, thanks to eBay's Secure Purchase, the new seamless and secure way to buy your next car. In just a few clicks, the title and DMV paperwork is all handled for you. There are thousands of cars like this on eBay, from rare finds like the Pontiac Grand Prix SJ to unique builds to your next daily driver. And now, a seamless way to buy them. eBay. Things people love. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Let's talk about something that loves to get advrider.com readers tied in a knot, which is Chinese motorcycles. CF Moto had a really large and a really nice display at the motorcycle show. And it's amazing how quickly this happens, because, CF Moto had, years ago, there was Hyosung. Remember Hyosung? What are they, South Korean?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
They had a deal with Suzuki, I think.
Yeah, they made like a cheaper SV650 Suzuki, and Hyosung had like 4 bikes in the corner, and you kind of knew they were not really going to be players. But CF Moto, in just a few years, in my local dealership here, where the town I live in, or just live outside of rather, they've replaced one of the Japanese brands. It was Honda with CF Moto. And so the CF Moto was really coming on, and I got to say, their stuff looked really good. They had that 675 triple street bike in there, which looked really good, sport bike. And then the what's the 450 Ibex? Is that right?
Ibex.
Yeah. which sounds like a trade show, oddly enough, for, I don't know, internal balancing devices, or I don't know. You can make it whatever you want to be. But it's a really good-looking bike. And you told me something I didn't know about the Ibex. That it was designed by Kiska.
Yeah, or it was up until fairly recently. I don't know if CF Moto has cut their ties with Kiska, like KTM has cut their ties with Kiska. Because CF Moto and KTM were all kind of tied together, and KTM owned Kiska, so it was all part of that.
Well, we should look into that, because if Kiska did it, I got to say, I may take back some of the bad things I've said about them, because it doesn't have the horrifying. Oh God, I don't even know. Sort of like if you took a person and you open them up and put all their internal organs on the outside, that's kind of a Kiska KTM. Whereas this bike was really nice and beautiful colors and lovely, beautifully finished, and a huge throng of people surrounding it every time I went by.
Yeah, I rode the 800 Ibex in Utah.
You did, yeah.
And Nevada last winter, and I thought it was a really great looking bike by modern standards. It wasn't about to make me, replace some of my all-time favorite ADV bike aesthetics, but it was pretty good for a modern machine. And like you say, it does show how far the Chinese manufacturers have come. What a lot of people don't realize, or maybe they do now because I tell them all the time, is that a lot of the Japanese branded bikes and the European branded bikes, everyone thinks you're buying Japanese or buying European, but they're all made in Thailand or in India now anyway.
Yeah.
And, what it just comes down to, what is the quality control in the factory where it's made? And if CF Moto can get their quality control in their Chinese factory up to the level of Kawasaki's quality control in its Thai factory, then CF Moto will eat into the big four, into their sales a lot. And I've said this for a long time now. Everyone thought that the big four was this sort of, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Honda, and Yamaha, that they were just untouchable. And I said, if CF Moto plays their cards right, it'll become the big five, because they have representation at most corners of the lineup now. They have a kind of a janky parallel twin cruiser. That's a big staple of the Japanese manufacturers. They've got a small adventure bike, medium-sized adventure bike. I think they have a big bore adventure bike as well. They've got the little 125 mini bikes. They've got naked bikes, sport bikes, and they even have, I believe, in some markets, a discount brand that's kind of like air-cooled 200cc dual sports or something like that. So lower priced models for places that require lower priced models, because Mexican farmers don't have as much money to waste as, a accountant from Milwaukee. So CF Moto, as far as I can tell, is here to stay.
One of the things that really struck me about the makeup of the show is it used to be that all brands sort of made, well, not all brands, I'm exaggerating, but most brands made a number of bikes. Like, even Ducati had a DFL cruiser, none of which were there, by the way. So every brand kind of had, dual sport and cruiser, but it in terms of what was displayed, you didn't see that anymore. Like it seemed like like Harley owned the cruiser thing. That was their thing, and there were very few cruisers elsewhere on display. And then there was a really vibrant ADV section. In fact, that seemed like the area where most of the sort of energy of the show was. And you had, maybe perhaps this is a reflection on the relative strength of the ADV marketplace, because you had like a booth from Moscow Moto, who've joined us on the podcast before, luggage. And there were a lot of tour operators for various tours around the world hawking their wares. So that is really interesting. Like, you didn't find companies offering, sport bike track days, at Misano or something. So really the ADV stuff, and I know this is an ADV site, so perhaps it sounds like we're blowing our own horn, but I don't think I'd do that. But it really was the most vibrant part of it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's where the industry is focusing their efforts and their marketing right now. I think the margins are there that aren't there in cruisers and sport bikes right now, and the sales are there. And especially, I think, in a lot of North America, we have a big outdoors here to explore, and we don't have a lot of affordable tracks. And I mean, you can go to a lot of places in the States where they don't even have any curves in the roads for probably 3 hours in any direction. You know, if you live in Nebraska, you're going to get a lot more excitement out of an adventure bike than you are out of your sport bike, because you can always find some sort of old trail along a river somewhere to travel, but you're not going to find, you know, a track, a racetrack, or at least not much for twisties. So I think adventure bikes have really come into their own here in North America in the past few years because of that. And of course, now we have the Backcountry Discovery Routes program, which gives people who don't know where to start, it gives them a way to find out places to ride locally, or maybe not locally, maybe on the other side of the country. But if you can get there, once you get there, you know where to go, and you're guaranteed a good time as long as you don't wrap yourself around a tree and you have good attitude.
We've talked about some of the highlights of the show. Now let's do the walk of shame around the show. And two things really struck out for me. Two things and a funny thing. So let's start with the things that are not funny. The food at these shows. I mean, this is a down in a sophisticated modern city. This is a downtown show, and you have these vulcanized pizza slices, and you can't get a proper coffee, good coffee. So I mean, it really is these halls, and I know that the show couldn't bring in their own food because I'm sure there's licensing agreements and so on, and that's how the show makes their money and some of their money. But that's really kind of inexcusable. But even more than that, every show I've ever been to, there's always somebody hawking a stereo system that's on an electric glide or a big Harley. And for some reason, they have to play incredibly shitty hair music at Mach 4 volume. And it is so offensive. And you can just see everyone just shying away, except for some old bald guy who's deaf anyway. So it is such an offensive thing. And the stipulations of the shows, when you sign as a exhibitor, you have to, there's a whole list of things that you can't do. And one of the things is you can't play music from your space. And yet the shows, because of the exodus of exhibitors, the shows are so desperate to find anyone that they just turn a blind eye to this. But it's really offensive. And I'm not talking like a little bit loud. I'm talking about like every conversation within 100 yards ceases to exist. And these guys just do this, and nobody, the show HQ, they never do anything to police this. And it's at various shows, and I talked to people about this, and various exhibitors, it became a really contentious thing, but the shows are just so timid about enforcing this. And then, okay, not to end on something negative, here's something really funny. Is one of the shops that was selling MV Agustas, which they were selling them at really great prices, because when KTM divested itself of MV, they sold them off to the dealers really cheap, and so the dealers are therefore passing on the good prices. But this one dealer said that if someone comes into them and doesn't have a motorcycle and is interested in an MV, and I love this, they say, don't buy it as your only bike. Parts may be a little spotty to get. And I just think that is, now you can shake your head and get angry at MV, but I see it differently, which is that's so beautiful. Ducati was in this place 25 years ago. They were the same way, or 30 years ago. And I just think it's so great. Like, just be honest. For most people, it's not going to be their daily rider. And so, for those few that might think that, oh, well, it's nice and new and it's no different than a Honda. Well, it is different. It is different than a Honda, folks. Although they're lovely bikes, but you don't want one as your only motorcycle. And that's the kind of like straightforward honesty that you just don't see anymore.
Yeah, I think that if the industry was to focus on that kind of honesty, you'd see some brands would suffer greatly and other ones would take a big step forward. So it might be good for us, and it might be bad. I'm not sure. What you're describing, I mean, with the with the person who you had that conversation with. That's one thing I like about the show is you do find some scummy people who play music too loudly and drive you nuts, but you find also the best people in the motorcycle world are there because they love motorcycles and they know that this place will be full of motorcycles on a wintry weekend when there's nothing else going on. So they go there, they bring their friends, and you can just walk around the show all weekend and bump into them all the time, whether they're working for the industry or if they're just visiting, and they're consumers. You meet the best people in the industry there, and the best people in the scene are there. And that's what I enjoy most about the show. I certainly don't go there for the food, as you say. I've been known to smuggle in. I've been known to smuggle in a Mr. Noodles.
Mr. Noodles is just a friend of Zach, by the way. Nothing to do with food. Yeah, I mean, it begs the question how much longer these shows can survive. One of the exhibitors, curiously enough, was a show called Motocraft, which is very much in the vein of the One Show or Born Free. It initially was in the city, and last year they had something in a rural area, a few hours from the city. And it's kind of a lifestyle show. The OEMs are involved; some of them are involved, and you can do test rides or various things like that. And they have bands. Actually, it's kind of weird. Last year they had the great band from Vancouver called the New Pornographers. Nico Case, the great Nico Case, used to join them on occasion. But then one of the guys in the New Pornographers, did you hear the story? He got busted for child pornography, which made
I did not hear that.
Yeah, which made the choice of the band name really unfortunate. But they persist as the New Pornographers. They got a new record out. They're a great band. But anyway, the New Pornographers were going to play at this show, and it was on a decommissioned military base. So I think those things are really gaining steam. But I think overall, not one thing will last forever. And I think the best of the shows change locations or reinvent themselves or become something else, because not everybody wants to do the same thing every year forever. And that's what happened with the old shows. And I think it's kind of a dying conceit. And they have to turn into something else to survive.
I think that you're definitely going to see an increase in those kind of shows. You look at Mossport at the Mossport races in the summer in August. I've never been, but I've seen the lineup, and that has turned into a real get away from the city for the weekend, go do test rides, go see new bikes, go watch motorcycle movies, along with the superbike racing. I think you will see the industry move further in that direction, but I also think that it's very hard to make a prediction when I know there's major OEMs that don't even have a staff, don't have the staff to drive a demo truck. One booth told me this in particular. They could probably find bikes to take on demo rides at dealers this summer. They don't have a staffer to drive them. So that will be, as much as anything, a restriction on these companies going forward. If they don't have the manpower to make these things happen, then they won't happen.
Yeah, and the one thing about the shows is that there's a certain reality, not only the cost, but you have to find employees to staff the booth, and you have to find employees who know enough about the product. And it's not that simple to find anymore, again, because of the staffing shortages. So there's just a reality, because of course the shows come in addition to their running a everyday business, and it's not easy to do it. But I think, for me, just to wrap this up, my thoughts are there's still a lot of merit in getting together with fellow motorcyclists. And I'm not overly social, I got to say. But, ride your bike tour, like you talked about in Canada here, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, which used to be called Mosport. All the dealers have test rides. And it's really some beautiful roads around there. And, the races end, and you walk down and you can ride a couple of bikes, and then the races start again and fall asleep under a tree. There's still a lot to be gained from an in-person experience. So I'd really encourage people to this summer, try to get out and maybe go to something new that you haven't gone to before. And so I'm actually going to go to Motocraft this summer. I haven't been, so I'm going to give it a go. And I'm sure we'll talk about that down the road too.
Who knows? Maybe if my wrist is patched up, maybe I'll meet you there.
But that would be lovely. Maybe we could get you some sort of mobility scooter.
That doesn't, I don't think that will be the answer. That might have been the part of the problem with the crash in the first place.
Zac, thanks for taking the time to join me.
Thanks again for having me, Neil.
This message comes from eBay. The worst part about loving cars might just be buying them and all the parts. From Toyotas to Aston Martins, eBay has thousands of cars and the largest online selection of vehicle parts and accessories. eBay, things people love. Well, it's the time of the show again where I review a product. I guess this is a product. Anyway, here's where this is coming from. The internet age has done a lot of good. You can find parts for your obsolete home light chainsaw, irrespective of where you live, and have them mailed to your house. That's the good. The bad is a lot of people out there don't really know what they're talking about. And with the rise of AI, which in and of itself is interesting because there's not enough genuine intelligence or human intelligence in the world. The last thing we need is artificial intelligence. But I digress. When you go on a forum, and I saw something last week where a guy had a motorcycle and he was asking what was the capacity of the cooling system. Only he had asked AI, and he was told that it was like 37 gallons or something outrageous. You know, it's the cooling capacity for the space shuttle. So this guy had gone onto a forum saying, you know, it's 37 gallons, right? And everyone ridiculed him, which I thought was a little bit mean-spirited, but, you know, fun all the same. So really, what I'm saying is, for those of you who have any interest in doing anything on your motorcycle, this is what's called a motorcycle service manual. And they're available for individual motorcycles. Forgive me if this sounds obvious to you, but not everyone knows these things. And because I own Ducatis, I have a number of service manuals, and I read them all, and then I sort of amortize the information, and I come up with something that works for me. Because not everybody knows what they're talking about with these things. I see stuff online about my interest, these Ducatis, and it's wildly, outrageously wrong. So I would really encourage anyone, if you want to do anything to your bike, and even if you don't want to do the work yourself, if you're taking your bike in for service, at least you can sound like you know what you're talking about, or you can have, you know, a vague notion of what the service, the shop going to do to your bike. The service, what am I talking? The service writer, that's it, is going to get the mechanic at the shop to do. And of course, information helps you to become a better consumer, and a consumer less likely to be ripped off. The cars you'll find in eBay are just different. They come with a story that you can't wait to share. Like this 1973 Dodge Charger on eBay that had been tucked away in an Arizona barn for over 40 years. Only 55,000 miles. And somehow, in great running order, it even has a rare sunroof. Suddenly, a car that was hidden for decades is being delivered in just a few clicks with eBay's secure purchase. All the paperwork handled. There are thousands of cars on eBay, from unique finds, like the Pontiac Grand Prix SJ, to daily drivers, and now with a new way to buy them. eBay, things people love. Thank you for listening to the Lowdown Radio Show.